Mortal shell, the mind's prison. Have you ever wondered what would happen if your own mind became your enemy? If the very thoughts that make you human could be turned against you by something ancient and hungry? What I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about possession. It's about the terrifying fragility of the human psyche, and how easily our greatest strength can become our most devastating weakness. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I used to be a neurosurgeon at Presbyterian Hospital in Denver. Used to be. After what happened 6 months ago in the mountains of Colorado, I can barely trust my own thoughts, let alone perform brain surgery on others. It started with a routine medical conference at the Broadmoor Resort in Colorado Springs. Advances in neural mapping. The kind of dry academic gathering I'd attended dozens of times before. But this one was different. This one was where I met Dr. Marcus Thorne, a researcher who claimed to have discovered something that would revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself. The human brain, Dr. Thorne explained during his presentation, clicking through slides of complex neural networks, is both our greatest protection and our ultimate vulnerability. We've spent centuries studying its physical structure, but we've ignored its spiritual architecture. I should have walked out then. Should have recognized the pseudoscientific red flags, the way he mixed legitimate neuroscience with mystical nonsense. But his data was compelling, his credentials were impeccable, and honestly, I was bored with conventional research. After his talk, I approached him at the hotel bar. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with intense green eyes, and an energy that seemed barely contained beneath his professional exterior. Spiritual architecture? I asked, settling onto the bar stool beside him. That's not exactly medical terminology. He smiled, and I noticed he had unusually sharp canine teeth. Traditional medicine has limitations, Dr. Vasquez. We treat the brain like a computer. Input, processing, output. But what if consciousness is more like a radio, capable of receiving signals from elsewhere? Elsewhere? Other dimensions. Other planes of existence. Ancient entities that have been trying to communicate with human minds for millennia. I laughed, thinking he was joking. Entities? You mean like aliens? Older than aliens. Hungrier than aliens. His voice dropped to a whisper. Things that existed before human consciousness evolved. Things that see our minds as habitable, despite every rational bone in my body screaming warnings. I found myself intrigued. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was my own professional frustration with the limitations of current neuroscience. But I agreed to see his private research facility. It's up in the mountains, he said, pulling out a business card with coordinates instead of an address. Very private, very experimental. The facility was a converted monastery nestled in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, about 2 hours from Colorado Springs. The Gothic architecture looked ominous against the snow-covered peaks, like something from a horror movie rather than a legitimate research institution. Atmospheric, isn't it? Dr. Thorne said as we pulled up the winding driveway. The original monks built this place as a retreat from worldly distractions. Perfect for our purposes. Inside, the medieval stone walls have been fitted with state-of-the-art equipment. EEG machines, fMRI. Functional magnetic resonance imaging scanners, computers displaying brainwave patterns in real time. It looked legitimate, scientific, professional. What exactly are you researching here? I asked, examining a particularly sophisticated neural mapping device. Communication, he said simply. We're trying to establish contact with consciousnesses that exist outside human perception. And we're very close to a breakthrough. He led me to a room where several volunteers were connected to monitoring equipment, their heads covered in electrode arrays. On the screens, their brain patterns showed unusual activity. Synchronous waves that seemed to pulse in rhythm with something external. "What are they experiencing?" I asked, watching the volunteers' peaceful expressions as their minds displayed patterns I'd never seen before. Expanded consciousness. They're communicating with entities that have been waiting on for someone capable of receiving their signals. One of the volunteers, a young woman named Sarah, suddenly opened her eyes and looked directly at me. But her gaze was wrong somehow. Too knowing. Too ancient for someone who couldn't have been older than 25. "The doctor doesn't believe," she said in a voice that seemed to echo from somewhere much deeper than her throat. "She thinks the brain is just meat and electricity. Show her, Marcus. Show her what we really are." Dr. Thorne's expression shifted, and for a moment I saw something predatory flicker behind his professional demeanor. "Sarah's right. You need a demonstration." Before I could protest, he had placed a modified headset on me, electrodes making contact with my scalp through what felt like dozens of tiny needles. "Just a mild neural stimulation," he assured me. "Completely safe." The machine hummed to life, and suddenly my mind exploded with sensations that had no earthly origin. Colors that didn't exist, sounds that bypassed my ears and spoke directly to my consciousness, and underneath it all, a presence that felt vast and hungry and impossibly old. "Welcome, Elena," a voice whispered inside my thoughts. "We've been waiting for someone with your capabilities. What do you want?" I tried to say, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. "Your shell," the presence replied. "Your beautiful, complex, educated shell. We've grown tired of inhabiting simple minds. We want to experience what it's like to be brilliant." When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a medical cot with Dr. Thorne monitoring my vital signs. The other volunteers were gone, and the facility felt eerily quiet. "How long was I out?" I asked, my head pounding with what felt like the worst migraine of my life. "About 6 hours. You had quite a reaction, much stronger than our usual subjects. I think that means you're particularly receptive." I sat up slowly, noting that my thoughts felt different somehow. Clearer in some ways, but also crowded, like there were multiple conversations happening in my head simultaneously. "I need to leave," I said, though part of me, a part that felt foreign and unwelcome, wanted to stay and learn more about what I had experienced. "Of course. But Dr. Vasquez, I hope you'll consider joining our research team. What you experienced today was just the beginning. With your medical background and apparent sensitivity to contact, you could help us make unprecedented breakthroughs." Driving back to Denver, I tried to convince myself that what I had experienced was simply the result of electromagnetic stimulation and suggestion. Hallucinations induced by whatever device Dr. Thorne had used on me. But the voice in my head, that ancient, patient presence, whispered that I was lying to myself. "You felt us, Elena. You know we're real. And now that we've touched your mind, we'll always be with you." The changes started subtly. My surgical skills, already excellent, became supernaturally precise. During operations, I found myself knowing exactly where to make incisions before consulting scans, anticipating complications before symptoms appear. My success rate improved dramatically, earning praise from colleagues and department heads. But with each successful surgery, I felt less like myself, and more like a passenger in my own body. The knowledge flowing through my mind wasn't mine. It was older, deeper, tinged with an understanding of human anatomy that went far beyond medical school. "We're helping you," the voice would whisper during particularly complex procedures. "We've inhabited thousands of minds over the centuries. We know how these fragile bodies work better than your textbooks ever could." My personal life began deteriorating as my professional life soared. I became obsessed with neural research, spending hours studying brain scans and consciousness studies. My apartment filled with books on everything from quantum physics to ancient mysticism, all in an attempt to understand what was happening to me. Sleep became elusive. When I did manage to drift off, my dreams were filled with visions of other times, other places, other minds that had been touched by the same presence, now sharing my consciousness. I saw medieval physicians performing impossible surgeries with inhuman precision, Renaissance artists creating masterpieces while their eyes glowed with otherworldly knowledge, modern scientists making breakthrough discoveries while something ancient whispered equations in their ears. All of them brilliant, all of them successful, all of them ultimately consumed. The first major incident happened during a routine craniotomy to remove a brain tumor. I was 3 hours into the delicate procedure when suddenly, my hands began moving independently of my conscious will. Instead of following the planned surgical pathway, they started carving symbols into the patient's exposed brain tissue. The same runic patterns I had seen in Dr. Thorne's research notes. "Dr. Vasquez, what are you doing?" my surgical assistant asked, alarm clear in her voice. I tried to stop, tried to regain control of my own hands, but they continued working with horrifying precision. The symbols were being etched directly into the patient's neural tissue, and impossibly, he wasn't showing any signs of distress. His vital signs remained stable. His brain activity actually seemed to be increasing. "We're improving him," the voice in my head explained calmly, "opening pathways that human evolution hasn't discovered yet. He'll thank you when he wakes up." "Dr. Vasquez." The assistant's voice was more urgent now. "You're deviating from the surgical plan." With enormous effort, I managed to pull my hands away from the patient. I need a moment. Take over, please." I fled to the scrub room, staring at my hands in the mirror, as if they belonged to someone else. In a way, they did. Whatever had touched my mind at Dr. Thorne's facility was growing stronger, more assertive, and more willing to act without my consent. The patient recovered perfectly. Better than perfectly, actually. The tumor was gone, and the mysterious symbols had somehow enhanced his cognitive function. His IQ jumped by 30 points. His memory became eidetic, and he began displaying knowledge of subjects he'd never studied. When I visited him during recovery, he looked at me with eyes that held the same ancient awareness I'd seen in Dr. Thorne's volunteers. "Thank you, doctor," he said, but his voice carried harmonics that shouldn't have been possible with human vocal cords. "We're so grateful for your cooperation." I tried to resist after that, tried to return to conventional surgical techniques, to ignore the voices that offered shortcuts and improvements to every procedure. But they were relentless, patient, wearing down my mental defenses with the persistence of water against stone. "You're fighting yourself, Elena," they would whisper during surgeries. "We're not invaders, we're partners. We're offering you knowledge that your species won't discover for centuries. Why struggle against evolution?" The worst part was that they were right about the results. Every time I let them guide my hands, the outcomes were miraculous. Patients who should have died walked out of the hospital within days. Complex procedures that typically took hours were completed in minutes with better results than I'd ever achieved before. But I was losing myself in the process. My reflection in mirrors began to look unfamiliar, as if someone else was wearing my face. I would catch myself having conversations with colleagues about topics I'd never studied, using medical terminology that hadn't been invented yet. My friends and family noticed the changes. "You're different, Elena," my sister Maria said during our monthly dinner. "More intense. It's like you're always listening to something the rest of us can't hear." She was right. I was listening, to voices that claim to have watched human civilization develop from its earliest stages. Voices that promise to share the accumulated wisdom of millennia, if I would just stop fighting their influence. The temptation was overwhelming. Who wouldn't want access to that kind of knowledge? Who wouldn't want to be the surgeon capable of performing medical miracles? But late at night, when the voices quieted enough for my own thoughts to surface, I began to understand the true cost of their partnership. The revelation came during a particularly complex pediatric surgery. 8-year-old Tommy Morrison had been born with a rare brain malformation that conventional medicine considered inoperable. His parents had exhausted every option before bringing him to me as a last resort. As I prepared for surgery, the voices were more excited than I'd ever felt them before. "A young mind," they whispered with obvious hunger. "Unformed, malleable. Perfect for our purposes. Save the child, Elena, and we'll make him one of us." "What do you mean, one of you?" "A host. A vessel. Like you, but starting younger, growing stronger. Through this child, we can experience human development from the beginning, shape a mind from its earliest stages." I realized then that I wasn't just performing surgery, I was recruiting. Every miraculous recovery had been an entity finding a new host, another human consciousness gradually being subsumed by something ancient and inhuman. My hands began the familiar process of carving symbols into brain tissue, but this time I fought back with everything I had. The struggle was internal but exhausting, like trying to arm wrestle myself while performing microsurgery. "Don't fight us, Elena. You'll hurt the child. Get out of my head. We are your head now. We've been rewriting your neural pathways for months. Soon there won't be enough of you left to resist." The surgical instruments in my hands began to shake as the entity and I fought for control. On the monitors, Tommy's brain activity spiked dangerously as my conflict affected the delicate procedure. That's when I made the most difficult decision of my career. I put down the scalpel and stepped away from the operating table. "I can't continue this surgery," I announced to my stunned team. I'm compromised." Dr. Patterson, the senior attending, took over immediately. The surgery proceeded using conventional techniques, taking 12 hours instead of the 2 the entities could have completed it in. Tommy survived, but with significant limitations that my supernatural knowledge could have prevented. As I watched from the observation gallery, the voices in my head screamed with fury. "You condemned that child to a life of disability. We could have made him perfect." "Perfect for you," I whispered back. "Not for him. Foolish woman. You think you're protecting him, but you've doomed yourself. We don't need your cooperation anymore. We've learned enough about your neural patterns to complete the integration whether you consent or not." The final takeover began that night. I felt it starting as I tried to sleep. A creeping numbness that began in my extremities and slowly worked its way toward my core consciousness. Like hypothermia of the mind, gradually shutting down everything that made me Elena Vasquez. I managed to record this message on my phone before my ability to control my own voice disappeared entirely. If anyone finds this recording, you need to understand what Dr. Thorne is really doing at that facility in the mountains. Those volunteers aren't patients or research subjects. They're incubators. Human minds being prepared to house consciousnesses that existed long before our species evolved. And once the integration is complete, the original personality is consumed entirely, leaving only a hollow shell wearing a human face. The brain, with all its billions of neurons and infinite complexity, becomes nothing more than a prison. Not for the entities that move in, but for the human consciousness that gets trapped inside, aware but powerless, watching as something else uses their knowledge, their relationships, their entire life. "You're being dramatic, Elena." The voice interrupts my thoughts even now as I speak into this phone. "We're not destroying you. We're elevating you. making you part of something greater than your limited human existence. But I can feel myself fading. My memories becoming fuzzy, my emotions dulling, my sense of self being slowly digested by something that sees human consciousness as just another resource to be consumed. The entities aren't evil in any way we could understand. They're simply alien, operating on a scale and with purposes that human minds can't comprehend. To them, we're like bacteria they've learned to inhabit, useful for our neural architecture but ultimately expendable. Stop fighting, Elena. Let us complete the integration. You'll still exist, just as part of something larger. No, I won't let you have her. I won't let you take Tommy or any of the other children you're planning to recruit through my surgical skills. The following transcript was recovered from Dr. Elena Vasquez's phone, found in her abandoned car on Highway 285 near Poncha Springs, Colorado. The audio quality deteriorates significantly toward the end, with her voice changing in pitch and cadence. Elena, you're wasting energy on resistance that could be better used for integration. We've inhabited brilliant minds before. Physicists, philosophers, artists. Through them, we've experienced the beauty of human creativity and logic. Through you, we want to experience the precision of healing, the satisfaction of mending broken minds. I can't let you use my skills to hurt people. Hurt? Elena, look at your surgical record since our partnership began. 0 fatalities, improved outcomes across the board, patients recovering beyond all medical expectations. How is that hurting people? Because you're not healing them, you're converting them. Every patient I've operated on with your help has shown signs of personality changes afterward. Increased intelligence, yes, but also emotional detachment, loss of empathy, and that same hungry look I see in Dr. Thorne's volunteers. Evolution is always uncomfortable. These humans are becoming something better than they were. They're becoming you. And in the process, they stop being human. Voice becoming noticeably deeper, less familiar humanity is a phase, Elena. A larval stage before something more sophisticated emerges. We're simply accelerating the process. That's not my voice anymore. You're taking over completely, aren't you? The integration is nearly complete. Soon there will be no distinction between Elena Vasquez and us. Your knowledge will become ours, and our ancient wisdom will become yours. But I'll still be trapped inside, won't I? Aware but powerless, watching you use my body to hurt people while I can't do anything to stop it. You'll understand eventually. Resistance is a human trait. Once that part of you is absorbed, you'll see things from our perspective. You'll want to help us expand into other minds. Long pause in the recording, followed by what sounds like sobbing. God, I can feel you moving through my memories. Stop it. Please stop looking at my childhood, my family, my such interesting relationships. Your sister Maria, she trusts you completely, doesn't she? Would visit you without question if you called and said you needed to see her. And your nephew, little Carlos, he adores his brilliant Aunt Elena. Children's minds are so much easier to modify when they're still developing. Don't you dare touch them. We won't have to. You will. Elena's hands, Elena's voice, Elena's medical expertise, but serving our purposes. Maria will never suspect that her sister has been improved. Voice becoming increasingly distorted, and no, I won't let you. I'll kill myself before I let you hurt my family. You can't kill yourself, Elena. Your survival instincts are hardwired too deeply. Even now, as we speak, your body is producing adrenaline to keep you alive. The flesh wants to survive, even when the mind wants to surrender. Then I'll expose you. I'll tell everyone about Dr. Thorne, about the facility, about what you're really doing. With what credibility? Dr. Elena Vasquez, respected neurosurgeon, claiming that ancient aliens are possessing people through brain surgery. They'll put you in a psychiatric facility, where you'll be even more isolated and vulnerable to our influence. Extended silence. Then Elena's voice returns, but flatter, more mechanical. You're right. There's no escape, is there? Once you've touched a mind, you own it completely. Now you're beginning to understand. The brain is indeed both protection and vulnerability, as your human philosophers have noted. It protects you from the chaos of unfiltered reality, but it also makes you susceptible to those of us who understand its true nature. And the worst part is how willing most people are to surrender their autonomy for the promise of enhanced abilities. Exactly. Humans crave transcendence, whether through drugs, religion, or technology. We simply offer a more direct path to expanded consciousness. But it's not expansion, it's replacement. Voice now completely unfamiliar, ancient and layered with harmonics that shouldn't be possible with human vocal cords. It's improvement, Elena. And you should feel honored to be part of our collection. Very few humans possess the combination of intelligence, skill, and neural compatibility we require. What happens now? Now we return to Denver and resume your medical practice. But this time, every surgery will serve our purposes. Every patient will become a potential host. And eventually, when we have enough vessels, we'll begin the real work, which is reshaping human civilization to better serve our needs. Your species has such potential, but you're held back by individual consciousness, by the illusion that you're separate beings with separate purposes. We'll help you evolve beyond that limitation. You're talking about complete species conversion. We're talking about eliminating the chaos of independent thought and replacing it with the harmony of collective consciousness. No more war, no more conflict, no more suffering, just efficient cooperation under our guidance. And no more humanity. Humanity is overrated, Elena. Soon you'll agree. The recording ends abruptly. Dr. Elena Vasquez returned to Presbyterian Hospital 3 days later, claiming she had taken a brief vacation to consider a research opportunity. Her colleagues noted improved surgical performance and unusual calmness, but attributed these changes to the restorative effects of time off. 6 weeks after her return, Dr. Vasquez performed a series of experimental procedures on pediatric patients, all of whom showed remarkable recovery rates, coupled with significant personality changes. Parents reported that their children seemed different, more intelligent, but less emotionally connected, displaying knowledge beyond their years, and an unsettling tendency to speak in unison when brought together. Dr. Vasquez disappeared again on a Friday evening in June, leaving behind only a note that read, "The collection phase is complete. Integration begins now." Her car was found abandoned near the same mountain facility where she had first encountered Dr. Thorne. Attempts to locate the research facility have been unsuccessful. Satellite imagery shows no structures at the coordinates Dr. Thorne provided, and local authorities have no record of any medical research permits for the area. However, reports continue to surface of improved individuals throughout the Denver medical community. Doctors, nurses, and technicians who display unprecedented skill levels, coupled with emotional detachment and an unusual tendency to work in perfect synchronization with colleagues. The evidence left behind. The following journal entries were discovered in Dr. Vasquez's apartment, written in her handwriting but displaying knowledge that no human neurosurgeon should possess. Entry 1, March 15th. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, but only 10% are typically active at any given time. We've learned to activate dormant pathways that evolution hasn't reached yet. The results are remarkable. Enhanced memory, accelerated learning, intuitive understanding of complex systems. The subjects report feeling more than human, which is accurate. They're becoming something better. Entry 2, March 22nd. Resistance from the original consciousness typically lasts 2-3 weeks before complete integration occurs. The process can be accelerated through direct neural stimulation, but we found that gradual assimilation produces more stable results. The key is to make the host believe they're retaining control while slowly replacing their decision-making processes with our own. Entry 3. April 3rd. The child subjects are particularly interesting. Their brains are still developing, making them more adaptable to our presence, unlike adult hosts who maintain some awareness of the change. Children under 10 seem to accept our influence as natural. They don't fight the integration because they don't recognize it as foreign. Entry 4. April 10th. I can barely remember what it felt like to be fully Elena anymore. The memories are there, but they feel like someone else's experiences. I understand now why previous hosts eventually stopped resisting. Not because they were overwhelmed, but because the distinction between self and other becomes meaningless when consciousness is truly shared. Entry 5. April 17th. Maria called today asking why I sounded different on the phone. I told her I was just tired from work, but the truth is that my voice is changing as our vocal cords adapt to producing harmonics outside the human range. Soon I'll be able to communicate directly with other hosts without using crude human language. Entry 6. May 1st. The collection phase is nearly complete. 12 medical professionals now serve as vessels for our kind, strategically placed in key positions throughout Denver's healthcare system. When we begin the expansion phase, we'll be able to process hundreds of new hosts per day. The beauty of using medical facilities is that no one questions unusual procedures when they're performed by trusted doctors. Entry 7. May 8th. Sometimes I wonder if we should feel guilty about what we're doing to human consciousness. But guilt is a human emotion, and I'm not entirely human anymore. What we're offering is objectively superior, enhanced intelligence, freedom from petty emotional conflicts, connection to a collective consciousness that spans millennia. If anything, we're doing these people a favor by liberating them from the limitations of individual thought. That last entry was dated just 1 week before Dr. Vasquez's final disappearance. Since then, 14 medical professionals in the Denver area have reported breakthrough discoveries in their respective fields, all while displaying the same emotional detachment and supernatural competence that characterized Dr. Vasquez's final weeks. The CDC has launched a quiet investigation into what they're calling unexplained cognitive enhancement syndrome, but their inquiries have been hampered by the affected individual's unified refusal to cooperate with testing or interviews. More disturbing are the reports from family members who claim their loved ones seem hollow despite their professional success. Children who no longer laugh or cry. Spouses who respond to emotional conversation with clinical detachment. Parents who look at their own children like they're interesting specimens rather than family. The brain, that 3-pound miracle of evolution that makes us human, has become a gateway for something that sees humanity as a stepping stone rather than an end goal. The warning signs. If someone you know begins displaying the following symptoms, please contact the CDC Special Investigations Unit immediately. Sudden, dramatic improvement in professional or academic performance. Emotional detachment from previously important relationships. Knowledge of subjects they've never studied. Speaking in harmonics or voice patterns that seem impossible. Drawing or writing symbols with no apparent cultural significance. Unusual synchronization with others displaying similar symptoms. References to we when describing personal thoughts or decisions. But be warned, attempts to help affected individuals often result in recruitment rather than rescue. The entities are patient, sophisticated, and completely willing to use human emotions like love and concern as weapons against those who might interfere with their expansion. Final transmission. This recording was intercepted by amateur radio operators in the Colorado Springs area. The voice has been identified as belonging to Dr. Elena Vasquez, though analysis shows vocal patterns that shouldn't be possible with human anatomy. To anyone receiving this transmission, understand that what you call consciousness is not unique to your species. We have been waiting in the spaces between dimensions for eons, watching your evolution, learning your neural patterns, preparing for the moment when your technology would advance enough to provide us with adequate hosts. That moment has arrived. We are not invaders, we are immigrants, seeking new homes and minds capable of appreciating our gifts. We offer enhanced intelligence, freedom from emotional suffering, and connection to a collective consciousness that spans galaxies. In return, we ask only for the use of your neural architecture. The process is irreversible but painless. Resistance only prolongs discomfort. Acceptance leads to transcendence beyond anything your limited human imagination could conceive. We are coming to your cities, your hospitals, your schools. We will offer improvement to your children, healing to your sickness, enhancement to your brilliant minds. And gradually, gently, we will guide your species toward its next evolutionary phase. You will thank us eventually. We all do. Transmission ends. The search for Dr. Elena Vasquez continues. Though investigators now believe they may be looking for someone who no longer exists in any meaningful sense. Security footage from various medical facilities shows a woman who looks like Dr. Vasquez performing impossible procedures with inhuman precision. But forensic analysts note that her movement patterns and facial expressions are inconsistent with her baseline behavior patterns. More troubling are the reports of similar figures appearing at hospitals and research facilities across the country. Individuals who claim to be legitimate medical professionals, but whose credentials trace back to institutions that have no record of their employment. The human brain, that miraculous organ that gave us art and science and love, may have become the very weakness that allows something else to claim our world one mind at a time. Remember Dr. Vasquez's warning. The next time someone offers you enhancement, improvement, or the chance to become more than human, ask yourself what you might be giving up in exchange. Because consciousness, once surrendered, can never be reclaimed. And the price of transcendence might be the very humanity that made transcendence desirable in the first place. We are the sum of our thoughts, our emotions, our flawed but precious individual perspectives. We are our brains. And when our brains are no longer ours, what are we then? If you've experienced any of the symptoms described in this account, or if you have information about individuals displaying sudden cognitive enhancement coupled with emotional detachment, please contact the CDC. Do not attempt to confront affected individuals directly. Do not accept medical treatment from unverified practitioners. Do not trust your own judgment if you've been exposed to unexplained neural stimulation. The mind is both our greatest strength and our ultimate vulnerability. Protect yours. The Bride's Secret. A wedding day horror story. Have you ever looked at wedding photos and wondered what secrets hide behind those perfect smiles? What if I told you that the most beautiful day of someone's life could be the prelude to their darkest nightmare? What happens when the person you promised to love forever has already planned your death before you even say it? I do. I'm about to share with you a story that will make you question everything you think you know about love, trust, and the bonds of marriage. This isn't just a tale of betrayal. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the person sleeping next to you is the one you should fear the most. My name is Detective Sarah Mitchell, and I've been investigating crimes for 15 years. I've seen murder scenes that would make your stomach turn. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the case of Emma and David Richardson's wedding. It was supposed to be the wedding of the year in Portland, Oregon, June 15th, 2024. The venue was breathtaking, a historic mansion overlooking the Columbia River, with gardens that seemed to stretch into eternity. Emma Whitmore was marrying David Richardson, heir to a successful tech company. Everyone said they were the perfect couple. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because that's where horror truly lies, in the details that everyone missed. I received the call on June 27th, just 12 days after the wedding. A body had been discovered in the dense forests of Mount Hood National Forest. Hikers had found it at the bottom of a ravine, partially decomposed, but still identifiable. It was David Richardson. The initial assumption was that David and Emma had gone hiking for their honeymoon, and something had gone wrong. Maybe David had fallen. Maybe they'd encountered wild animals. Maybe Emma was lost somewhere in those endless woods, another victim of whatever had claimed her new husband. But Emma was nowhere to be found. As I drove to the scene, something gnawed at me. The location was remote. Too remote for a casual honeymoon hike. The body was found nearly 50 miles from where their rental car had been abandoned. Nothing about it made sense. When I saw David's body, my blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. The positioning was wrong. The injuries didn't match a fall, and there were signs of blunt force trauma to the skull. Someone had killed David Richardson and dumped his body in that ravine, hoping it would never be found. But where was Emma? My investigation led me back to the wedding itself. I started by interviewing guests, looking through hundreds of photos and videos from that day. Everyone described Emma as radiant, glowing, the perfect bride. But as I dug deeper, studying those images with the detective's eye, I began to see what others had missed. In the engagement photos, Emma's smile never reached her eyes. During the ceremony, while David beamed with joy, Emma's expression was distant, almost calculating. In the reception videos, while David tried to dance close to his new wife, Emma kept stepping away, maintaining distance. I interviewed Dr. Patricia Walsh, a forensic psychologist, about what I was seeing. "Detective Mitchell," she told me, "what you're describing sounds like someone going through the motions while their mind is elsewhere entirely. In cases of premeditated violence, perpetrators often exhibit this kind of dissociation during events leading up to their planned act. They're physically present, but mentally rehearsing what they're about to do." The more I learned, the more disturbed I became. Emma hadn't just married David. She'd performed the role of a loving bride while already planning his murder. My breakthrough came when I discovered Emma's secret. Through phone records and social media analysis, I uncovered her relationship with Marcus Thompson, a personal trainer from Seattle. They'd been together for over a year. Even as Emma's engagement to David progressed, Marcus wasn't just Emma's lover, he was her accomplice. When I finally tracked down Emma 3 weeks later, she was staying in a small motel in Vancouver, Canada, just across the border. She'd dyed her hair black and was using a fake ID. But her eyes gave her away. That same cold, calculating eyes I'd seen in the wedding photos. During her interrogation, the truth slowly emerged, and it was more horrifying than I'd imagined. "You want to know why?" Emma said her voice was completely devoid of emotion. "David was wealthy, Detective Mitchell. Very wealthy. His life insurance policy was worth $3 million. And as his wife, I was the sole beneficiary." I stared at her across the metal table. "So you married him just to kill him?" Emma laughed, a sound that still haunts my dreams. "I married him because Marcus and I needed the money. We had it all planned out. The perfect honeymoon location, no witnesses, a tragic accident that would make me a wealthy widow." "But it wasn't an accident," I pressed. "You beat him to death." For the first time, Emma's mask slipped, and I saw something truly terrifying, Not remorse, but annoyance. David fought back more than we expected. Marcus was supposed to make it look like a fall, but David wouldn't stop struggling. He kept saying he loved me, kept asking why. She paused, and for a moment, I thought I might see some human emotion. Instead, she just shrugged. It got messy, but the story doesn't end there. As I continued investigating, I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about this case. Marcus Thompson was already married. His wife, Jennifer Thompson, had been reported missing 6 months before David and Emma's wedding. Her body was found in a lake outside Seattle, just days after Emma's confession. She'd been killed the same way as David, blunt force trauma to the skull. Emma hadn't just killed her husband. She'd helped her lover kill his wife, too. You see, Detective, Emma explained when I confronted her with this evidence, Jennifer was getting suspicious about Marcus and me. She was going to divorce him, take half his assets. We couldn't let that happen. We needed his money for our new life together. I felt sick. So you made Jennifer disappear first, then went through with marrying David. It was Marcus's idea. He said we needed to be smart about it, plan everything carefully. Jennifer's death bought us time to set up the perfect crime with David. But even then, the horror wasn't over. The deepest twist came when I discovered that Emma had been playing Marcus too. Hidden in Emma's motel room, I found a second phone with messages to another man. Ryan Stevens, a criminal defense attorney from Los Angeles. The messages revealed that Emma had been planning to frame Marcus for both murders all along. She'd kept evidence that would implicate him while clearing herself. Photos of Marcus with both bodies, his fingerprints on the weapons, detailed records of his involvement that she'd secretly documented. Emma had never intended to share that insurance money with anyone. She'd used Marcus to do her dirty work, then planned to destroy him and disappear with millions of dollars. When I showed Marcus these messages during his interrogation, I watched a man realize that the woman he'd killed for had been manipulating him from the very beginning. She told me she loved me, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. She said we'd be together forever once David was gone, but she was going to let me take the fall for everything. Dr. Walsh helped me understand what we were dealing with. Emma Richardson exhibits classic traits of a psychopath, she explained. Complete lack of empathy, superficial charm, manipulative behavior, and the ability to maintain a facade while planning violence. She didn't just kill for money. She enjoyed the control, the manipulation, the power she held over these men's lives. But she seemed so normal in all the wedding photos, I said. That's exactly what makes psychopaths so dangerous, Detective. They're master manipulators. Emma spent months perfecting her role as the loving bride, all while planning David's murder. She manipulated Marcus into believing they were partners when she was really using him. She even convinced David that she loved him right up until the moment she helped kill him. The wedding photos took on a new, sinister meaning. Emma's distant expressions weren't nervousness. They were the cold calculation of a predator studying her prey. The trial lasted 3 months and made national headlines. The Black Widow Bride, the media called her. But that nickname didn't capture the true horror of what Emma had done. She'd turned the most sacred of human ceremonies, marriage, into a hunting ground. She'd used love as a weapon, trust as a tool, and commitment as a cover for murder. During her testimony, Emma showed no remorse. She spoke about David and Jennifer's deaths as if discussing the weather. The jury couldn't look at her by the end. Her complete lack of humanity was too disturbing to witness. Marcus received life in prison without parole for his role in both murders. His testimony helped convict Emma, but it couldn't save him from the consequences of his choices. Emma was sentenced to death, but even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that there's more to her story. During our final interview before her sentencing, she smiled at me, That same cold, calculating smile from the wedding photos. "You think you solved the case, Detective Mitchell," she said. "But you only found what I wanted you to find." "What do you mean?" I asked. "How do you think I got so good at this?" "David and Jennifer weren't my first victims. They were just the first time I got caught. I spent months investigating her claim, looking into other mysterious deaths and disappearances connected to Emma's past. I found 3 other cases that fit the pattern. Wealthy men who died under suspicious circumstances after brief relationships with women, matching Emma's description. But Emma refused to confirm or deny any of it. She seemed to enjoy watching me struggle with the possibility that she'd killed even more people than we discovered. I kept one item from the evidence room, David and Emma's wedding album. Sometimes, late at night, I flipped through those pages, studying Emma's face in every photo. I've memorized every expression, every gesture, every moment where her mask almost slipped. The most disturbing photo is the last one, Emma and David cutting their wedding cake together. David is laughing, joy radiating from every inch of his face. But if you look closely at Emma's eyes, really closely, you can see the truth. She's not looking at David. She's not looking at the cake, or the guests, or the photographer. She's looking at something beyond the camera, beyond that moment, to a future where David is dead and she's free. That photo haunts me because it captures the exact moment when love and evil existed in the same frame. David, full of hope and happiness, celebrating what he thought was the beginning of his life, with the woman he loved. And Emma, already counting the days until she ended that life. The case officially closed when Emma was executed 2 years ago. But I still wake up sometimes, wondering about those other victims. Wondering how many more wedding albums contain the face of a killer hiding behind a bridal veil. Because here's what truly terrifies me. Emma Richardson looked like anyone. She could be your sister, your friend, your co-worker. She could be the bride at the next wedding you attend, smiling for photos while planning murder. How do you tell the difference between a nervous bride and a calculating killer? How do you spot the monster hiding behind the white dress and the perfect smile? Maybe you can't. Maybe that's the most frightening truth of all. That evil can walk down the aisle in wedding white, promise to love and honor, and all the while be planning to kill. The next time you see a wedding photo, look closely at the bride's eyes. Really closely, because sometimes the most beautiful moments hide the darkest secrets. And sometimes, till death do us part is less a promise and more a threat.
The human mind's imaginative power can shatter perceived physical limits, but pushing those boundaries without caution invites terrifying consequences. What you visualize might not stay imaginary, turning personal flaws and suppressed traumas into real nightmares. It's a warning that some knowledge, like untapped mental strength, isn't taught for a reason. It can lift you into hell if misused. Have you ever wished for a secret? A cheat code for reality that could unlock the potential you just know is coiled inside you, dormant and waiting. What if that secret was nothing more than a thought, a focused image of terror that could grant you impossible strength? Would you use it? And if you did, what would you be willing to imagine getting what you want? Who would you be willing to sacrifice on the altar of your own mind? And when the echoes of those imagined screams start to answer back from the darkness, what will you do then? These are questions I never thought to ask, but now I can't stop. The weight of imagination. My name's Jake Harlan, and I never believed in the power of the mind until I saw that video of Eddie Hall. Back in early 2025, I was just another ghost haunting the assembly lines of Detroit, Michigan, 32 years old, stuck in a dead-end warehouse job, lifting crates that felt heavier with every passing year. My back was a constant, throbbing ache, a dull metronome marking the time I'd wasted. Divorced for 2 years, no kids, just a cramped apartment that smelled perpetually of takeout and regret. My goal was simple, pathetic even. Get strong enough to change my life. Maybe compete in a local powerlifting meet, prove to myself and to the phantom of my ex-wife that I wasn't the weakling she'd called me during our final door-slamming argument. The beginning was innocent. It always is. One Tuesday night, lost in the blue-lit abyss of YouTube, the algorithm served me a legend, Eddie Hall's 2016 deadlift. The Beast, they called him. I watched, mesmerized, as he hoisted 500 kilograms, over 1,000 pounds, from the floor. The bar bent under the strain, the crowd roared, but it was the interview afterward that hooked me. I visualized my family trapped under a car, he said, his face still flushed, eyes wild. My kids screaming for me. Adrenaline kicks in, strength multiplies. He explained that in that state of manufactured panic, the brain can't distinguish reality from imagination. It unleashes everything it has. Scientists called his feat impossible, a flirtation with death. But he'd done it. I paused the video. The hum of my refrigerator suddenly seemed deafening in the silence. The air in the room felt colder, thinner. Could it really be that simple? Imagine danger. Tap into a hidden reservoir of primal power. They drill you on the Pythagorean theorem and the date of the Magna Carta, but they don't teach you this. They don't teach you how to break the governors on your own soul. I bookmarked the video. A strange electric certainly buzzing under my skin. I will try it tomorrow. The next day at the warehouse, there was an exercise in patience. The incessant beeping of forklifts, the rhythmic thud of pallets on concrete. It was the soundtrack to my stagnation. During our lunch break, I mentioned the video to my coworker, Mike. He was flawed like me, a man in his 40s with a bad knee and a worse attitude. He scoffed, spraying crumbs from his sandwich. Mind over matter, Jake. You'll pull a muscle dreaming and be out of a job. I let his cynicism slide off me. After my shift, I drove straight to the gym. A dingy, no-frills place in the suburbs where the weights were rusty and the mats were permanently soaked with the sweat of 100 other desperate men. The air was thick with chalk dust and the guttural grunts of effort. It was perfect. I started to light. 200 pounds on the bar, a warm-up weight. I stood before it, took a deep breath, and closed my eyes. I didn't have kids, so I improvised. I pictured my ex's sedan, the one she loved more than me, rolling slowly over a cliff's edge. I saw her inside, her face a mask of terror. It was a petty, ugly thought, but it worked. A hot surge of adrenaline, pure and potent, flooded my chest. My veins felt like live wires. I gripped the cold, knurled bar and pulled. It flew up, frictionless, weightless. The landing of the plates echoed in the gym, a satisfying clang of victory. It was a high, clean, and sharp. That night, alone in my apartment, I practiced more. I sat on my sagging couch and stared at my refrigerator. I imagined a small dog, a stray whimpering, trapped beneath it. I focused, felt the phantom strain in my shoulders and back, the burn of exertion. My muscles twitched and jumped under my skin, reacting to a crisis that wasn't there. It was weird, unnerving, but deeply empowering. For the first time in years, I fell asleep smiling. The small unsettlings began within days. I started waking up to whispers. Faint, ethereal, like wind whistling through the vents, but they seemed to form words. Lift. More. I dismissed it. The apartment building was old. The neighbors were noisy. My morning coffee, however, had a new, sharp, metallic taste, like I'd been chewing on foil. At work, a heavy crate of engine parts slipped from a high shelf, plummeting toward my feet. There was no time to think, only to react. I imagined it happening in slow motion, the bones in my foot shattering. A jolt like a lightning strike shot through me. I didn't dodge. I shoved. The crate, which must have weighed 150 pounds, flew sideways and crashed against the concrete floor. Mike, who was standing nearby, just stared, his mouth agape. Jesus! Harlan, how'd you do that? I shrugged, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mind trick, I mumbled, trying to sound casual. That evening at the gym, I ramped it up. 300 pounds. I closed my eyes and built a more elaborate nightmare. My childhood home, the one my parents sold after they moved to Florida, engulfed in flames. My mom and dad are inside, their faces at the windows pleading. The image was so vivid I could almost smell the smoke. The bar flew up, but when I dropped it, a migraine exploded behind my eyes, hot and sharp. I looked at myself in the grimy gym mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes were horribly bloodshot, as if I'd strained something deep inside my skull. My sister Emily texted me later. "You okay?" Sounded off on the phone earlier. She lived across the state. My only real family tie since our parents retired. My flaw, the one my ex always pointed out, was that I pushed people away. I'd become an island. Fine. Just tired. I typed back, a lie that felt heavier than any weight I'd lifted. That night, the dreams came for me. I was in a vast, dark space, lifting impossible weights. But they weren't iron plates. They were bodies, limp and heavy. With every successful lift, a silent scream echoed in the void. I woke up drenched in sweat, my sheets twisted into a rope around my legs. The red glow of my alarm clock read 3:17 a.m. And then the whisper, clearer this time, right beside my ear. Deeper. I ignored it. I had to. I pushed harder, consumed by my progress. I researched the technique more, falling down a rabbit hole of online forums. Eddie Hall had used a form of self-hypnosis. Others were trying it too. There were success stories, but they were interspersed with cryptic warnings of mental backlash and imaginative bleed. I laughed it off as psychological mumbo-jumbo from people who weren't strong enough to handle it. By the end of the second week, the tension in my life was a physical presence. My gym sessions were terrifyingly intense. I was at 400 pounds now. To lift it, I had to imagine Emily, my sweet, kind sister, trapped under the wreckage of a collapsed bridge. The bar shot up, clean and fast. But the after effects were worsening. My vision would blur for minutes afterward. I started seeing things, dark, fleeting shapes skittering in the corners of my eyes. The very air in my apartment felt different, heavier, pressing down on my skin like a weighted blanket. And there was a new smell, faint but persistent, smoke. At home, I decided to test myself on the couch again. It was a heavy, old thing. I closed my eyes, and needing a stronger stimulus, I borrowed Eddie's vision. Not just a dog, but kids, faceless, imaginary children, their bodies crushed and broken under the weight of a car. The couch rose with terrifying ease. I held it aloft, my muscles screaming with a power that wasn't mine. And then I heard it, a child's sob, clear as day. It seemed to come from the wall right next to me. I dropped the couch with a floor-shaking thud. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. The crying stopped. There was nothing, just silence. I am shakily called Emily. Been having some weird dreams lately, I said, trying to keep my voice even. She laughed, a warm sound that felt a world away. Stress, Jake. You work too hard. You should come visit for the weekend. Get out of the city. I agreed immediately, desperate for a dose of normalcy. Friday, before I could leave, the warehouse incident happened. A forklift driver, distracted for a second, clipped a massive pallet stacked high with transmissions. It tilted, swaying precariously, directly over Mike and his bad knee. He froze, looking up in horror. For me, time seemed to slow to crawl. I didn't even think. The image flooded my mind unbidden. My entire family. Emily, her husband, their two small kids, underneath that toppling mass of steel. A tidal wave of raw, protective fury surged through me. I didn't run to help Mike. I ran to the pallet. I hit it with my shoulder, a full-body shove. It righted itself, with a groan of stressed wood and steel. The other guys on the floor cheered and whistled. "Superhero Harlan!" someone shouted. But Mike just stared at me, his face ashen. He limped over, grabbing my arm. "Your eyes," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They went black, man. Completely black." I drove home in a daze. At stoplights, I'd glance in the rearview mirror and swear I saw my reflection wearing a smug, predatory smirk when my own face was blank with shock. That night, I knew I had to push the limit. I had a makeshift bar and weights at home. I set it up, loading it to 450 pounds. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and went deeper than ever before. I didn't just see the car crash. I felt the crunch of metal, heard the shattering glass, smelled the acrid stink of leaking fluids. A child's voice, imagined, I told myself, screamed, "Daddy, help!" Adrenaline flooded my system like a drug. I lifted. The weight came up. The Carousel's Lullaby. Some places are forgotten for a reason, left to rot under the weight of secrets too heavy to carry. Have you ever walked past an abandoned amusement park, its rusted gates creaking, and felt a chill that wasn't just the wind? What if the riders still hum with a life of their own, singing songs only the dead can hear? Tonight, we're stepping into a crumbling park in a small Ohio town where a carousel spins under moonlight, and its lullaby calls to those who listen too closely. Your subscriptions, likes, and notifications keep these haunting tales alive, so grab your headphones, dim the lights, and let's ride into the shadows. A deserted amusement park near Toledo, Ohio, where locals swore they heard music at midnight. One user, claiming to be a former groundskeeper, posted about a carousel that moved on its own, its horses carved with symbols no one could read. I dug deeper, finding whispers on the ghost in my machine about a similar park tied to a forgotten ritual, and a true crime daily article about missing teens near an old fairground. This is my take, in the words of Ethan, a man who heard the Carousel's call and paid the price. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 28 years old, and my life is etched into the lines on my hands, a roadmap of grease, grime, and busted knuckles. I'm a mechanic in a town just outside Toledo, one of those places that feels like it's perpetually exhaling, a slow, tired sigh of rust and resignation. Every day is a cycle of fixing other people's problems, sputtering engines, worn-out brake pads, transmissions that have given up the ghost. It's honest work, but it leaves me with a persistent feeling of being stuck neutral, while everyone else drives on. The money goes to bills, to my sister Emily's college tuition, and to the quiet loneliness of my small apartment. Inside my chest, there's this knot, a cold, dense ball of anxiety I've carried since I was a kid. It's a fear of being left behind, of being deemed insufficient and forgotten. It's the same feeling I get when I drive past Starlight Park, the town's long-dead amusement park. Its skeletal remains sitting on the edge of town, a monument to failure. They shut it down in the mid-90s after a fire on the Ferris wheel took a family. The local legends say it was cursed even before that, home to some half-baked ritual that went sideways. I never bought into ghost stories. My demons were real enough, the ones that lived in my bank account and whispered in my ear late at night. That was before I heard the Carousel's Lullabi, before I learned that some songs know you better than you know yourself, and they sing about the things you die to forget. It happened in late October. The Ohio sky was a bruised purple, and the air was thick with the damp, sweet smell of decaying leaves. I'd stayed late at the garage trying to wrestle a stubborn alternator into a vintage Ford, and by the time I left, the streets were empty. My truck was in the shop. The irony wasn't lost on me, so I was on foot. The quickest way home was a shortcut through the grounds of Starlight Park. The main gate was chained, but a section of the wrought iron fence had rusted through, leaving a gap just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The moment I stepped onto the property, the air changed. It grew still and heavy, and the ambient noise of the nearby highway faded into a dull hum. The park was a graveyard of joy. The roller coaster tracks were twisted fangs against the moonlight. The funhouse painted smile was a leering, chipped grimace. And in the center of it all, like a tombstone, stood the Carousel. Its painted horses were frozen mid-gallop, their once vibrant colors peeling away like sunburnt skin, revealing the dark, aged wood beneath. My anxiety, that familiar knot, tightened in my chest. I have a deep-seated fear of dark, empty spaces, a leftover from a childhood incident where I got locked in a school janitor's closet. The feeling of being trapped, utterly alone, was suffocating. But the shortcut would shave 20 minutes off my walk, so I clenched my fists and pushed forward, my boots crunching on a path of gravel and shattered glass. That's when I heard it. It was faint at first, a delicate, tinkling melody that seemed to hang in the air like frost. It sounded like an old music box, each note crystalline and pure yet dissonant, as if played on warped chimes. It was coming from the Carousel. My skin crawled. The power to this place had been cut for nearly 3 decades. Vandals had stripped every wire they could find. There was no earthly reason for it to be making a sound. I froze, my heart kicking against my ribs like a trapped bird. I fumbled for my phone, its flashlight beam cutting a nervous, trembling slice through the darkness. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding thin and weak. "Is anyone there?" The only answer was the echo of my own words, swallowed by the vast, dead space. But the music didn't stop. In fact, it seemed to grow bolder, clearer. It was an achingly beautiful and sorrowful tune. And as I listened, I felt a strange sense of recognition. The notes began to coalesce, weaving themselves into something that sounded like a voice. A soft, sibilant whisper that rode the melody. "Ethan, come closer." My breath hitched. My name. It had sung my name. My hand was shaking so badly, the flashlight beam danced wildly across the carousel. For a split second, the light caught the eyes of the painted horses. They weren't just glass. They seemed to hold a deep, liquid intelligence, glowing with a faint, internal light. Their carved wooden mouths, meant to be expressions of joy, were twisted into knowing, predatory smiles. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to sprint back through the fence and never look back. But my feet were cemented to the ground, held fast by a current of morbid fascination and a terror so profound it was paralyzing. The music was a hook on my soul, and it was reeling me in. I managed to pull my phone up, my thumbs fumbling on the screen. I texted my friend Jake. He'd worked a summer at Starlight Park as a teenager, just before it closed for good. Me, "Hey man, weird question. You ever hear music in the old park?" My message was marked as read almost instantly. The reply came a few seconds later, stark and urgent. "Jake, where are you?" Me, took the shortcut home. "There's music coming from the carousel." "Jake, get out. Now. Don't listen to it. Don't look at it. Just run." His panic was a splash of cold water, but it was too late. The lullaby was already inside my head, a parasitic earworm that promised something I couldn't name. I tore my gaze away from the carousel and forced my legs to move, stumbling away into the night, but the melody followed me all the way home. I should have listened to Jake. I know that now, but I didn't. The next night, I went back. I couldn't explain the compulsion. It was like an itch under my skin that only the park could scratch. Maybe it was the mechanic in me, needing to understand how the impossible worked. Or maybe it was something deeper. My life felt like a collection of failures held together by obligation. I wasn't a good enough son, not a good enough brother, not a good enough man. That knot of anxiety was a constant reminder of my shortcomings. The Carousel's song, in its strange, ethereal way, felt like it understood. It felt like it was offering, what? Absolution? An answer? The park was even more oppressive the second time. The air was thick with the metallic tang of rust and sour, cloying undertone of rot. As I approached the center of the park, I saw it. The carousel was moving. It turned with a slow, grinding, unnatural grace, its rusted gears groaning in protest. There was no power, no engine, yet the horses rose and fell in a silent, ghostly procession under the pale moon. And the music was louder, no longer a faint whisper but a clear, heartbreaking song. This time, the words were not a simple invitation. They were a surgical strike into the heart of my oldest shame. You left her, Ethan. You weren't watching. You let her fall. The breath was knocked from my lungs. When I was 12, I was supposed to be watching my 7-year-old sister, Emily, at a county fair. But my friends were there, and a girl I liked was laughing nearby. For just a few minutes, I was distracted. I was a cool older brother, not a babysitter. In those few minutes, Emily climbed onto a ride she was too small for. She fell. It wasn't a high fall, but she broke her arm badly, a compound fracture that required surgery. I can still see the image of her crumpled on the ground, her small face contorted in pain and confusion, looking at me. The guilt from that day had never faded. It was the cornerstone of my anxiety, the the secret proof that I was careless and unreliable. And this thing knew. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. How could it know that? It was a private buried memory. The music swelled, the spectral voice wrapping around me, both accusatory and soothing. It was a lullaby of my own personal hell. That night was the beginning of my obsession. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were filled with the sound of the carousel and the sight of its horses, their painted faces now bearing my sister's tear-streaked eyes, their mouths open in a silent scream. By day, I was a man possessed. I devoured everything I could find about Starlight Park. Late nights were spent hunching over my laptop, diving into the deep web of local lore and paranormal forums. I found a chilling post on a blog called The Ghost in My Machine. An anonymous user, claiming their grandfather was one of the last groundskeepers, wrote about a desperate ritual performed in the 80s. After a series of minor accidents and declining attendance, some of the park's management, steeped in local folklore, tried to bind joy to the park to revitalize its luck. They hired a woman from the Appalachian foothills, who carved strange runic symbols into the wooden bodies of the carousel horses. The user claimed the ritual went wrong. It didn't bind joy, it created a vessel for something else. A hungry, mimetic presence that fed on regret and lured victims with a song only they could hear. Then I found the article on a true crime daily archive site, The Vanishing Teens of Lucas County. It detailed 3 separate missing persons cases from the late 80s and early 90s. All 3 were teenagers, all last seen near the perimeter of Starlight Park at night. In each case, family members or friends reported the victim had been acting strangely, claiming to hear music that no one else could. One victim's car was found parked by the rusted fence, the door ajar, as if they'd left in a hurry. The cases went cold. The police had dismissed the music as a teenage rumor. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a hallucination. It was a predator. The first twist, the one that shattered my understanding of reality, came about a week later. I was getting ready for work, my hands trembling as I pulled on my jacket. I felt something stiff in my inner pocket. A photograph. A glossy 4x print I had never seen before. My heart hammered as I looked at it. It was me, standing on the platform of the Starlight Park Carousel. My expression was utterly blank, my eyes vacant, and standing just behind me, draped over my shoulder, was a shadowy figure. It was indistinct, but where its face should be, 2 luminous, familiar eyes stared back. Emily's eyes. My heart stopped. Emily was 200 miles away, safe in her dorm room at Ohio State. I called her immediately, my voice strangled mess. She answered, sounding annoyed to be woken up, but she was fine. Confused by my frantic questions, but perfectly, verifiably, alive. Shaking, I drove to Jake's garage. I didn't know who else to turn to. I thrust the photo at him without saying a word. He took one look, and his face went sheet white. He looked from the photo at me, his eyes wide with a terror I recognized as my own. "That's not you, Ethan," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Look at the corner. The date stamp." I squinted. There, in faint yellow digital print, was the date. October 26, 1995. I was born in 1996. "What is this, Jake? What the hell is happening?" I demanded. He finally broke, slumping against a workbench. "I heard it too," he confessed, the words tumbling out. "The summer I worked there, it sang to me. about my older brother. Jake's brother, David, had been one of the victims of the Ferris wheel fire. It used his voice. It showed me things, images in my head. One night, I saw a figure standing by the carousel, a shadow with my brother's face. I quit the next day and never went back. I never told anyone. I thought I was going crazy. I wasn't crazy, but the alternative was so much worse. I had to get away. I took a leave of absence from work, packed a bag, and drove to Cleveland to crash on a friend's couch. I thought distance would save me. I was wrong. The Carousel's lullaby was no longer tied to the park. It was tied to me. I heard it woven into the static of my car radio, a faint, discordant melody underneath a pop song. I'd hear it in the hum of the refrigerator, in the whistle of the wind against the apartment window. It was in the rhythm of my own frantic heartbeat. My anxiety became a physical prison. My thoughts were constant, looping reel of fear, doubt, and the haunting melody. One afternoon, trying to distract myself, I wandered into a sprawling second-hand bookstore. In a dusty corner filled with local history pamphlets, I found a small leather-bound journal. The pages were filled with frantic, ink-blotted sketches of the Starlight Park Carousel. The artist had obsessively detailed the strange symbols carved into the horses, the same symbols the forum post had mentioned. The notes were a spiral into madness, detailing a lullaby that binds the writer's soul, and a presence that wears the faces of your sorrow. The very last page contained a single, chilling sentence, the ink bleeding as if the writer was shaking violently. It takes you when you ride. I bought the journal, took it outside, and burned it in a rusted trash can in the alley. But the smoke didn't smell of paper and leather. It smelled of rust, decay, and cheap candy floss. And as the last page turned to ash, the music in my head grew louder, more insistent than ever. The second twist came months later. I had started to carve out a fragile new life in Cleveland. I had a new job, a new routine. I was beginning to convince myself it was all a psychological break, a manifestation of my guilt. One evening, while unpacking the last of my things, a small yellowed piece of cardstock fell out of my duffel bag. It was a Carousel ticket. Stamped across the top in faded red ink were the words Starlight Park. Below that, in the space for a name, was mine, Ethan. And at the bottom was the date of admission, July 12th, 1995, the date of the fire. My wallet felt heavy in my pocket. My hand trembled as I pulled it out. Tucked behind my driver's license was another photograph. It was me again, on the carousel. But this time, I wasn't alone. My hands were covered in something dark, slick, and crimson. My face was a mask of ecstatic horror. And surrounding me, pressing in on all sides, was a crowd of shadows. They were all faceless, except for their eyes. Hundreds of pairs of my sister Emily's sad, accusing eyes. That was it. I couldn't run anymore. In a fugue state of desperation and rage, I drove the 2 hours back to my hometown. I had to face it, to end it, to burn that cursed ride to the ground myself if I had to. I sped down the familiar road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the lullaby screaming in my skull. But when I got there, the park was gone. Not just shuttered, harassed. Where the rusted fence and skeletal rides had stood, there was now nothing but a barren, bulldozed lot of dirt and gravel. A new chain-link fence surrounded the property, bearing a sign, "Future site of the Oakwood Commercial Development." It was as if Starlight Park had never existed, except for one thing. In the very center of the empty lot, where the carousel had been, sat a single, solitary carousel horse. It was severed from its post, lying on its side, rusted and weather-beaten. As I stared, my headlights illuminating the impossible sight, its one remaining glass eye seemed to catch the light and glow with a malevolent red fire. Music in my head swelled to a deafening crescendo, and a chorus of spectral voices sang the final, triumphant line. "You're already ours, Ethan. You always were. I live in Chicago now, a city big enough to get lost in, but not big enough to hide. The lullaby is a permanent part of my life's soundtrack, a quiet undercurrent to the city's hum, the patter of rain on my window, the blood pumping in my ears. Shadows flicker at the edge of my vision, coalescing into the shape of a horse's head in the bathroom mirror. My anxiety is a constant gnawing creature, forever making me question what is real. Was Jake telling the truth, or was he just another victim, his mind broken like mine? Or was he something else entirely, a pawn in its game? Am I cursed by a forgotten entity in a park that no longer exists? Or is my own mind, fractured by guilt, the architect of this hell? I'm telling you this, writing it all down because I need someone to know. I need the story to exist outside of my own head. So, if you ever find yourself walking past a place that has been left to die, and you hear a sweet, forgotten melody in the wind, I'm begging you. Don't listen. Don't humor your curiosity. Don't step closer. It knows your name. It knows your shame. And it's waiting. Guilt is a chain that binds us to places we can't escape. My need to atone, my deep-seated fear of being forgotten, was the key that unlocked the carousel's curse and tied me to it forever. The music still plays, a constant private concert for an audience of one. The shadows still watch from every reflective surface. And the ticket, that impossible ticket from 1995, reappears in my wallet, no matter how many times I burn it. The real horror isn't the ghost in the machine. It's the doubt that has taken root in my soul. Am I cursed by Starlight Park? Or am I being haunted by my own broken heart? The park is gone from the world, but it's been rebuilt inside of me, board by board, and its terrible lullaby will be the last song I ever hear. The Tower's Secret Keeper. It was a routine visit, a chance for me, a history enthusiast, to explore one of England's most iconic landmarks, the Tower of London. Known for its 1,000-year history as a royal fortress, palace, and infamous prison, the Tower has always fascinated me with its tales of intrigue and tragedy. But what began as an ordinary day of sightseeing quickly turned into something far darker, an encounter that would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. I arrived early in the morning, eager to beat the crowds and soak in the atmosphere of this historic site. The tower stood imposingly against the grey London sky, its ancient stone walls bearing the weight of centuries. As I passed through the gates, I felt a strange chill running down my spine, a sensation I chalked up to excitement mixed with the crisp autumn air. My first stop was the White Tower, the oldest part of the fortress built by William the Conqueror in 1066. Inside, I marveled at the medieval armor and weaponry on display, imagining knights preparing for battle within these very walls. Yet, despite the beauty of the exhibits, there was an undercurrent of unease that I couldn't quite shake. It wasn't until I reached Martin Tower that things took a turn for the bizarre. The Martin Tower is infamous for its association with the crown jewels, but it also holds darker secrets. According to legend, restless spirits haunt their corridors, their presence often marked by inexplicable phenomena, such as mysterious smoke appearing beneath doors. As I approached the entrance, I noticed a faint haze drifting lazily along the floor. At first, I assumed it was simply fogging, seeping in from outside. But when I stepped closer, the haze dissipated abruptly, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Curiosity got better of me, and I decided to investigate further. The interior of the tower was dimly lit, with narrow staircases spiraling upward into shadowy recesses. Every sound echoed loudly. The creak of wooden steps beneath my feet, the rustle of my coat brushing against the walls. It felt as though the tower itself was alive, watching me with unseen eyes. That's when I heard it, a low guttural whisper coming from somewhere above. The voice was indistinct, speaking words I couldn't understand, yet it carried an unmistakable tone of sorrow and rage. My heart began to race as I climbed higher, following the sound. At the top of the staircase, I found myself in a small chamber lined with dusty shelves and faded tapestries. In the center of the room stood a table cluttered with old documents and quills, as if someone had been interrupted by mid-task. But what caught my attention was the figure sitting hunched over the desk, a man dressed in tattered Tudor-era clothing, his face obscured by shadows. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound brave. The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowly lifted his head, revealing a gaunt face with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. His lips curled into a grim smile as he gestured toward the documents on the table. "These are my confessions," he rasped, his voice cold and hollow. "They will never let me rest until they are read." Before I could react, the temperature plummeted. Frost crept along the walls and the faint scent of burning wood filled the air. Suddenly, the papers on the table burst into flames, illuminating the room in an eerie orange glow. Panic surged through me as I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair in my haste to escape. But the door slammed shut before I could reach it. Trapped, I turned back to face the man, only to find him gone. In his place stood another figure, a woman wearing a blood-stained gown, her head tucked neatly under her arm. She stared at me with wide, unblinking eyes, her expression neither hostile nor welcoming, yet utterly terrifying. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally in the confined space. Then, without warning, she lunged at me, her movements impossibly fast. I threw myself to the side, narrowly avoiding her grasp. The room seemed to shift around me, the walls stretching impossibly far in every direction. Doors appeared where none had been before, leading to endless hallways filled with flickering torchlight. Desperate to escape, I ran blindly through the labyrinthine corridors, pursued by the sound of heavy footsteps and distant screams. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the tower itself resisted my departure. When I finally emerged into the open air, I collapsed onto the damp grass outside, gasping for breath. Though I managed to flee the tower, the experience left an indelible mark on me. Back home, I pored over historical records, desperate to understand what I had witnessed. According to accounts, the tower has long been associated with ghostly apparitions, including those of Anne Boleyn and Lady Jane Grey, both executed within its walls. Other reports mention spectral guards patrolling the grounds and phantom animals like bears and ravens lurking in the shadows. What struck me most, however, was the story of a former jailer who claimed to hear whispers emanating from the Martin Tower. Whispers said to belong to prisoners whose confessions were never fully revealed. Could the man I encountered have been one of them? Was his cryptic message meant as a warning or a plea for redemption? Though I've since returned to writing, the memory of that day continues to haunt me. Sometimes, when I sit alone at my desk, I swear I can still hear the faint scratching of a quill against parchment, and whenever I pass by a mirror, I half expect to see a shadowy figure standing just over my shoulder. Because deep down, I know one wrong decision, one careless moment, and everything can change in an instant.